This is the Eye for an Eye channel. Welcome to today's show. I wanted to cover COINTELPRO. I've never done a specific video on COINTELPRO, and I want to have one out there so people could reference what COINTELPRO is. COINTELPRO is a government, well, they claim, of course, as they always do, that it's disbanded, but it was a covert operation that the government used to infiltrate groups. And the history around COINTELPRO, because it does exist. It's not something that we all made up in our own heads. Okay, the government's admitted in the 50s and 60s that they use covert means to disrupt activities of groups that it considered to be discrediting leaders, any type of operation that they thought might be means to eventually cause some type of an uprising. They claim that they use COINTELPRO with the Black Panthers, with Martin Luther King. COINTELPRO is continually going on. Just like we've been told that the Illuminati disbanded when they disbanded in 1776 or whatever year they claim that it was disrupted and then it was stopped from happening. They lie, of course. To cover up the evidence of its actual existence, they say it's disbanded. And they know that's all they need to say for the casual zombie out there to immediately just go, oh yeah, it's been disbanded, and actually trust these people who, and from the initial onset, when you say something like the Illuminati, they should be like, whoa, wait, what is this? But when they find out they've been disbanded, they don't even care about the conspiracy that they're involved in. Same with things like COINTELPRO, with MK Ultra, with human cloning. The government's like, oh yeah, we dabbled in some of these experiments on humans. We don't do it anymore. Instead of going, whoa, what? You're doing what to humans? You're experimenting on their brains? You're doing all this type of stuff? Well, we should probably make sure that you're in a prison cell for crimes against humanity. Instead, they just go, we disbanded it. We're good people. And everyone just believes that they disband this stuff. But actually, COINTELPRO, his counterintelligence programs, they claim were discontinued in 1971, are continuing to go on today. And I did a video yesterday talking about the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire is a COINTELPRO thing. QAnon is COINTELPRO. These are, and you can believe whatever you want. I understand that people out there, they like these things. They like Q. They even think that some people I've seen recently even talking about me being a supporter of Q. They don't really listen to anything people say. Obviously, they just automatically do what the government wants, which is to lump us into these government-created groups, right? So the government creates these things as counterintelligence. So when I was talking about the Daily Wire, I was talking about it because there was an actual movement that was occurring here on YouTube. There was tons of us, and we were all covering similar topics with the FEMA camps, with CERN, with all the signs and symbols, with the trafficking rings. We were covering this before this huge thing blew up into people's faces. Now, there's obviously been people throughout history who have exposed the New World Order, from Ted Gunderson to Bill Cooper. And then agents have always been put in place, right? Alex Jones is one of the perfect examples of an agent. Even though I know some of you probably like Alex Jones, understand that they're agents. And you could sit there and you can go, well, how do we know you're not an agent? Well, I'm not an agent. I'm telling you that, giving you my word. However, you're allowed to think whatever you want. As long as you're freely thinking, I don't care if you think that I am something and I'm not something. I'm trying to help. If I was an agent, I wouldn't have been thrown around. Just like Bill Cooper, he had ties to the government, so people think that he's an agent. Some people don't agree with a lot of the stuff, or some of the stuff he said, so they don't like him. And that's perfectly fine. You're allowed to have your own opinion. Form your own opinion when you listen to people. Use your own discernment. However, Bill Cooper was whacked. Okay, they killed Bill Cooper for exposing eventually what happened on that 11th day of September, which he was talking about before it actually happened. Conveniently, he was taken care of right after it happened. And of course, before that, Alex Jones kind of was sliding into the picture, kind of becoming the new version of Bill Cooper. Now we know what Alex Jones is. Alex Jones, of course, censored on YouTube. That was the beginning of the mass censorship movement. He was doing his job as a COINTELPRO agent. Infiltrate. Now, he was obviously doing this long before I was, but he's been an agent in place for a very long time, just like the Illuminati card game says. He's been an agent in place, and his purpose is any type of government censorship comes, etc., they put him in as the face of that. Right? And then people hear what he says and how he yells and the stuff that happened in court recently. And of course, people see him and then they want to lump us with him and some of the crazy stuff that he spews and the way that he acts and he sounds, obviously. And what it does is it brings about more censorship to anybody that covers the same topics. And that's why he went and laid down in court for that ridiculous lawsuit that happened without actually saying, oh, I don't think that it actually occurred, and I'd like to see evidence, and why don't you show us death certificates and all this stuff. He just literally went in there and was like, I just made it all up because I wanted to get views, etc. And that's how everybody perceives us now because of, the COINTEL counterintelligence operation that they run. So The long history of COINTELPRO is that our government has used the FBI and the CIA to infiltrate. What they used to do is, and they still do, they do what's really illegal harassment, intimidation. This has to do with gang stalking. Those are the tactics they use. Smear campaigns, infiltration, right? So the truth movement that we had was growing so big. It was becoming very insane. Like I started and got 500,000 subs in a year, and a lot of people thought I was an agent, and I understood why. Because I'm able to stand back and look at this stuff and say, okay, it is kind of ridiculous. Now, I always knew I had the gift of talking and leading, etc. So, I could see both sides, but I understood where people were coming from, right? But I wasn't the only channel that was big. There was tons of us, okay? And what ended up happening is they used COINTELPRO to infiltrate the movement and create all these new branches, which is the Daily Wire, which is Russell Brand, which, of course, Alex Jones was already in place. But these people started not just infiltrating, they were put in place to be the people that everybody who is, into conspiracies would turn to and go to, so they could, get a little bit of truth for them, because of course there's a little bit of truth smeared in. Otherwise, how would these people lure you in, right? They have to give you some truth. QAnon has to give you some truth. How else are they going to lure you in if they were just completely not talking about conspiracies and giving you some truth? That's the point. Alex Jones too, InfoWars. They give you a little truth, and then they lead you the way that they want to lead you. And eventually, this is going to lead to a massive psyop. Now, that's what January 6th somewhat was. It was COINTELPRO. It was an infiltrated movement. Of course, I believe personally that it was actually started from the government, the entire thing, which it was. So in a sense, it's COINTELPRO, but at the same time, it was a government-created event, which was fully infiltrated by them. But it was really actually infiltrated the other way around. They set the whole thing up. And then natural people organically went and wanted to be a part of it, not realizing they were actually joining into a psyop and a false flag at the same time, so that they could be arrested and obviously put things in place, put things in people's minds in place, where any type of anti-government rhetoric is considered a terroristic threat now in this country. So if we look at the history of COINTELPRO and you listen to some of the stuff they try to spew, they say COINTELPRO is a counterintelligence program conducted by the FBI from 1956 to 1971 to discredit and neutralize organizations considered subversive to U.S. political stability. Okay, that's the definition. So when we hear that sentence, what do we automatically think, right? People are like, oh, it's got to be some type of a group. Well, the group, this is pre-internet, okay? So this is like groups forming, militia-type groups forming, who are anti-government, who are going against the stuff because they saw the globalist infiltration then, and they were using counterintelligence to either infiltrate it or just fully discredit and smear those people, so much so that they would lose any following they have. Now, if they did something like that to someone such as myself, it would, they can do that, but they use it more so to they've removed the entire movement, right? So there was a truth movement where a lot of us who just are organically doing this from our own the places that we live, recording this stuff, putting stuff up, now it's a production. Right, you see the Daily Wire. It's a production studio. It's a show. They make movies. Right, that should be an automatic telltale sign. They've infiltrated. They've infiltrated. Yes, but they've put agents in place who are Hollywood celebrities like Russell Brand, etc. Now we see this entire movement of conspiracy, which was small and which was getting tons of views because so many people were realizing what was going on. They needed to put something in place so that they're led to their agents. So their agents will give them a little taste and lead them in the wrong direction, keep them trapped in the left, right. So let me continue with the definition of COINTELPRO for people out there. Okay, so the counterintelligence program conducted by the FBI from 56 to 71 to discredit, neutralize organizations considered subversive to U.S. political stability, which is us. It was covert and often used as a means to criminalize various forms of political struggle and derail several social movements, such as those for civil rights and Puerto Rican independence. So social movements, again, is a key thing. Now they've taken, so what we were all doing, right, talking about this stuff, there was movements happening. People were starting to get together. People wanted to meet and actually go, do maybe protests. I don't know exactly what some of them want to do, but even like talks of buying land together, that's something that's been brought up lots of times over the years with all of us from the old guard. We would talk about buying land, maybe going to this land, knowing that they probably would use COINTELPRO to infiltrate it. And then, of course, create some type of Waco false flag around it, which is something we all have to keep in mind with anything we do is infiltration. So you hear the difference in terminology now, right? So political struggles, social movements is now known as culture wars. So they've taken this thing, because somebody yesterday even commented, they said something about culture wars. That's what they do. They work, their culture wars, you're more like deeper down the rabbit hole. Culture wars is just a made-up term. Okay, there shouldn't be a culture war going on because people shouldn't be supporting some of this insane stuff that's going on with castrating kids, etc. The media has created the culture war on purpose, and so they're giving you two sides of it, the extreme right and the extreme left. This shouldn't even be getting discussed, is my point. Nobody should be talking about men castrating kids. Nobody should be talking about men having babies. Anybody who talks of it should be thrown in an insane asylum, or we should just start arresting people for wasting our time, wasting our tax money, and obviously putting people into a mass psychosis where children actually are thinking that this stuff is the real world and being brainwashed into actually, doing this to themselves, causing themselves serious mental health problems. So we should be stopping it. So when I talk about COINTELPRO and the Daily Wire, etc., they're just gaslighting it. That's what they're doing. They're gaslighting this stuff. They're making a mockery of it. Some people find it funny. It's not my sense of humor, but whatever. But they're not. They're put in place to obviously bring attention to this stuff because it is so insane. But their end result is like when you have Ben Shapiro on there, right? And all he's doing is telling you if you don't support his people, you're a horrible person. You should be in prison. You're a threat, et cetera, right? So you're using the same type of censorship that the left does, right? Which is how they've infiltrated the movement. They're actually calling for censorship of speech as well, pretending that they aren't calling for a censorship of speech. On top of that, Ben Shapiro, the books that his people have written and follow, et cetera, that go back to Mystery Babylon, or Babylon, excuse me. We are Mystery Babylon in my belief, but go back to Babylonian teachings. They all talk about those books that he follows talk about all these gender ideologies. Okay? They go back to that book that ends with the word mud, which, again, you can find videos on that on the website uprisingrevival.com because you can't talk about it here. Their books talk about this stuff. Their books talk about bringing about a new world order. So anybody who's funded, because Daily Wire is funded by those people, okay, is keeping you tied into the hive mind of the left and the right. So I'll continue on with your COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO operations were initiated against various organizations, including the Communist Party, the SWP, Socialist Workers Party, Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, Black Panther Party, American Indian Movement, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the KKK. Of course, the KKK, one of my first videos I covered, because at the time they were just, what they're doing it now, we're all desensitized constantly with the race stuff. The KKK, of course, connected to Freemasonry and Albert Pike. That's where these organizations come from. That's why they're allowed to exist here. They're here as divisive measures, obviously, in any society. We should never have groups like the KKK. They should still let them freely exist, of course, because they continue to help race bait. So that's why they're here, instead of everyone just going, all right, just get rid of them. And they go, oh, well, that violates their rights. So, yeah, I see my rights violated every day. I can't even talk freely on the internet because I'm exposing all these government ops. Instead of, if I sat here and I talked the way that I talk and I was fully in on Trump, I probably would have millions of subs and be very, very popular, right? Because they could say, oh, yeah, they would promote me. They wouldn't censor me at all. Okay, so when we talk about some of these groups, you hear the Southern Christian Leadership Conference mentioned as well. That's because the government has infiltrated, and I've talked about that in the past too, the evangelical movement. All of these preachers who all look the same and talk the same have been put in place for quite a period of time. The Billy Grahams of the world, etc. What have they been put in place for? They've been put in place to give you a one-sided viewpoint of what a Christian's supposed to look like, how they're supposed to act, how they're supposed to talk. And the same way I talk about the blue-haired, crazy liberal people and how we can look at them and identify what they like to do in the bedroom based on how they talk, how they look, etc. They've done the same thing with the evangelical movement, right? They formulated what a Christian is supposed to look like, talk like, act like. And a lot of the times they end up being hypocritical, which is also done by design because usually these evangelical ministers are outed as doing something disgusting behind the scenes or doing something illegal with money, not paying taxes, tax evasion, right? So that everybody out there sees it and they're like, oh, look, these Christians, they're hypocrites. Look at their leaders. They don't follow what they preach. All done by design. Okay, so they've infiltrated the church. We obviously know that. We see all the agents of the church. Nobody has to look further than looking at Joel Osteen. Okay, and then how they start giving you they try to give you a little taste of scripture. Then they, of course, are compliant and on board with all the government agendas, like pushing the LGB, etc. All of this stuff, right? The hate movement, hate crimes. The fact that we even address hate crimes as a real thing is really just how we've gotten into this mess. The whole term hate speech on top of it, because, again, that's how we end up in a couple of years with absolutely zero speech when they have the technology in place to fully monitor what we say. Well, they do, but I mean, the more laws and stuff will be in place and people will be more okay with them arresting people for what they say, and that's what we're headed towards, right? We already have cancel culture. The next thing is going to be, oh, this guy said this about the government, arrest him. And everyone will just agree with it. Right now, you might say people wouldn't agree with that. Yeah, they would. And we're going to get closer to that, and it's going to be more like China. So Let me just finish reading here about COINTELPRO. So the tactics used with COINTELPRO include intense surveillance, which we're all under. You might also remember, let me just jump into that real quick with intense surveillance for those because I'm talking about the truth movement online being infiltrated by COINTELPRO, and that's what these groups are. That's what Daily Wire, et cetera, are, Russell Brand, et cetera, right? Intense surveillance at the time when this mass censorship happened after the pizza event, and everybody started getting removed one after the other, okay? And the only reason I'm still here is because I've rebranded, used different names. That's the only reason that I'm here. Okay, if I actually used the name that I had used, people would be able to find me again, and then I would get deleted, et cetera, et cetera. So to be able to just talk even to a small audience is worth it to me than having to deal with, and I still deal with censorship because people still follow me around, flag me, and then they don't like the content I'm talking about, but they don't really know, is this the same guy, is it that guy? And I'm not going to say the name, obviously, of who I used to be on here. So when you talk about intense surveillance, there was a list that was floating around that had the names of my old channel. It had the names of a bunch of YouTubers who you all knew, a lot of you, and if you're new to it, you didn't know them, but a lot of you, I assume, have been around the block with a lot of this stuff. All of our names were on watch lists. And then, boom, everybody got wiped off. So there's surveillance going on around the clock. And again, I'm probably not on it yet, but I'll be back on a new list with a new name, and then I'll have to do another thing with another name because that's how I have to get around it. So then we talk about organization, infiltration, anonymous mailings, and police harassment, which I know a lot of you deal with gang stalking. These programs were exposed in 1971 when the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI burglarized an FBI office in Pennsylvania and stole confidential files and then released them to the press. More information, and this again is before the press was fully controlled. Fully controlled. Now it's fully controlled. None of this stuff gets out. Nothing makes the air unless they want it to, which is why I constantly have to remind people, remember, any story that comes out in the news is out there because they want it out there. This is used as a herding mechanism. Otherwise, it wouldn't make the airways. So they said more information regarding COINTELPRO was later obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, lawsuits lodged against the FBI by the BPP and the SWP, and statements by agents who came forward to confess their counterintelligence activities. A major investigation, and again, this is another thing to be very aware of, right? They tell you that they get rid of these things and disband it. All they do is rename it, and it's something you never would get, right? The OSS is now the CIA. That was called, the OSS stood for the Office of Strategic Services. Does that sound like some type of intel agency? It was America's first intel group. It turned into the CIA because they were getting pushback. They rename it, and then they tell you it's doing something totally different, and it's not. Okay, so same with COINTELPRO, same with MKUltra. Oh, they found out about MKUltra. They just rename it something else so that people get off their case and they say that they disbanded it in case anything leaks. That's what they've done time and time again. So they tell you COINTELPRO, oh, this happened. And then an investigation was launched in 1975 by the U.S. Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intel activities, commonly referred to as the Church Committee, for its chairman, Senator Frank Church of Idaho. Millions of pages of documents remain unreleased, and many released documents are heavily censored. So, again, they don't let all of the facts come out about these things. And then, of course, when they do talk about it, they say, well, they infiltrated the Black Panther Party. Because, again, they can use that to gaslight people based on, oh, the government's doing this based on race, and we have race. Okay, they were infiltrating the Black Panther Party and other groups like that because they were threats to the government. They really didn't have as much to do with race as you think. Okay, maybe because of the people involved, but they realized what the government was actually doing. And so, again, COINTELPRO is real. So I covered that with the Daily Wire so that you can understand that what they've done is now we don't even look at the mindset of this the same anymore because we've been so desensitized, right? Like it's normal for, okay, suddenly we have all these truthers, right, who just disappear. And these other people emerge talking about similar topics, but keeping you trapped in the left, right, because the majority of us always told you about the left, right, and how fake it was. Now nobody even talks about it. They all support MAGA or the other side, et cetera, right? Well, obviously, all conspiracy people would end up supporting MAGA if they're not awake to what's really going on with the left, right. So you got all these guys who replaced all of us and blew up, right? Which is fine, right? I mean, it's whatever. We remember some of the people, and Jeff C. used to talk about it over and over again. He would be going nuts, absolutely nuts about this stuff. He couldn't believe it. They're making movies now. We have truthers making movies. It's ridiculous. But we had like guy like Jack, was it Posobiec? Let me just make sure I get his name right. I'm not going to stop recording. Jack Posobiec, right? This guy became this huge figure in the truth movement. Okay, when I was covering things like the pizza event, these guys were unknown, and they were actually following my content because they were agents. And he was even commenting and stuff in some of the videos, and then went to the pizza parlor, and then he blew up after it as if he had done something or uncovered something. He took people that were really into it, and then he led them in a different direction, which is what the provocateurs do, right? So all these guys have blown up and replaced all the old guard. They keep you trapped in left, right. And then we become so desensitized. We see some of these things, or not us, but I mean, it's amazing how much this has evolved, where you have people who are supposed to be truthers or whatever, trying to get the truth out to people, the real actual truth about government conspiracy, and they don't. And then on top of that, they're literally making movies of Snow White. All these CIA operative films like Cinderella that were created, they're remaking those, going, well, we're just doing it to make it anti-woke. And then they're doing the same crap, dumbing down kids, as I showed you in the video yesterday or whatever day I put up, of how they make this cookie cutter type of programming for kids to watch, and then they tell you it's not woke. But it does the same thing. It has the same type of results to the dumbing down of children and why we have such a dumb society. So this is COINTELPRO at its finest. The Daily Wire is a perfect example of. They act like they're suppressed. Now Tucker Carlson acts like he's suppressed. Russell Brand, oh, I'm censored. None of them are censored. Okay, and I'm not doing this to say, look at me, I'm censored. Nobody cares anymore what happened to me and what happened to other truthers. It is what it is. But I'm telling you, if you're out there, if you don't understand, because I see a lot of you commenting, defending Daily Wire, it's just COINTELPRO at its finest, at its easiest to see. Okay, these are COINTELPRO agents. This is a government operation to infiltrate movements to stop any type of uprising from happening. So these people will talk about the same type of stuff. They'll never talk about solutions and things like that. And you might look at me and say, have you talked about solutions? I have, here and there, of things that I think that we can do and should do, but I have to be careful what I say, because people are watching me. I'm on watch lists. I've always been on watch lists on here, at least for quite some time. So they might not have wind of me yet, but if they do, and they'll listen to the watch list, who knows what they could do with the watch list. So obviously I have the website to talk about stuff like that. And I also have my mind, because I don't have technology in my body, so I could still think freely. And I have plans in place of what I would like to do and what I think should be done when all this stuff goes down. And one of the things I'll openly say is we all need to get together as far as realizing where these underground bunkers are, where these bases are that these people are around. So we could look at, obviously, bases around the homes of a lot of these people, et cetera, but we wouldn't know for sure where they were going. But we just need blueprints of these places, because that's where they're going when they blow when crap hits the fan. If we come out on the other side of it, then things can occur. But again, those are other topics I'm granting off. And I wanted to just cover COINTELPRO so you can understand agents are in place. Jones was the first, really the first big one. Obviously, this goes back to way before Jones, but I'm saying in the truther movement, when conspiracy started becoming normal. Now, there was conspiracy after JFK, but it started getting bigger and bigger in the 90s with MK, when MK Ultra came out, and then you had cloning and all this stuff. In the 90s, it became kind of big. They used things like those satire newspapers in the grocery store as a means of mind control to deflect and make fun of and mock this stuff. And then with people like Bill Cooper, who, yes, has ties to the government, so I understand when people are like, oh, can you trust that guy? And maybe some of the stuff he said, even on religion, et cetera, or faith, you have to question. So I totally understand that. I expect you to question even me. I'm not saying I'm going to pro, because I'm not. I'm just a guy who does this recording. I mean, proof is in the pudding. Right? Judge a person by their fruits. Am I always perfect? No, of course not. Nobody is. Do I say some things sometimes that might be over the top? Yeah. Do I yell and scream sometimes? Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, the proof should be the fact that, my audience has just been getting murdered off, and I'm still here fighting. I would have quit, right? I'm still here fighting because I'm trying to get the truth out. And if you understand how the government works, how they infiltrate movements, anything natural, organic that might occur, they have to infiltrate it and take over. And that's what they did with the truth movement. So COINTELPRO is still alive. It is still doing what its purpose is. And people out there might look it up and they'll be like, oh, yeah, they disbanded. Oh, it has to do with the Black Panthers. It has to do with any movement that they deem a threat. And we obviously have proven that we were one of the biggest threats to this communist cabal, whatever you want to call it, that has been taking the rights away of people over and over again while just doing all these disgusting acts with kids. And keep in mind, all the stuff that I have covered and still cover with Satanism and the occult, you never hear the alt-right really go into detail. They'll bring up, like, they're satanic. They don't go into Aleister Crowley. They don't go into the teachings involving the spell casting with children, the blonde hair, blue eyes, any of that stuff. And they're not ever going to go into that stuff. Ben Shapiro, Matt Walton, they're never gonna, okay? And it's funny that Shapiro sits on that bagel-run channel organization, the Daily Wire, tells you need to support them, and then all the people on there are like anti the trans and all that stuff, and he's even in the movie when it's his books that he's telling you need to and have to support that are the ones responsible for this entire movement. But he'll never let you know that, of course, because he's a gatekeeper. That's what they all are. COINTELPRO, folks. I want to do a video on it. Hope you're all well. Appreciate everybody who's here. Thanks again, everybody. God bless you as always and your families.